Can I get a mic or a mic and a half? That the source owe me. Shout out to the editor staff. Yeah, I'm all grown, so much better with math. I need a spread in the Forbes, taking the Benjamin bath. Yeah, I'm serving this track like Steffi Graf. Yeah, Roger Federer, there's no competitor.
Urban Tennis, episode 38, Swiss Excellence. Welcome back, everyone, to the Urban Tennis Podcast. I'm your host, joined by my co-host.
How do you do?
Pretty good. We're recording this on Wednesday evening, November 26th. We've just seen the Swiss team, led by Roger Federer and Stan Wawrinka, win their first Davis Cup. We'll discuss the week that was with the Swiss team, the turmoil and the triumph, and this late moving story about the French kind of countering Stan Wawrinka. What's up with that? We're going to talk about the ATP World Tour Finals, or the dud of the ATP Tour Finals that we had this year. We're going to talk about some significant WTA youngsters, or young stars, having coaching changes. And we're going to talk about, in our media technology segment, how the tennis world should cover the upcoming IPTL exhibition series. So if you're ready, let's get started with episode 38. The Davis Cup just concluded on Sunday with Roger Federer clinching it with an easy win over Richard Gasquet. But the story, I think, drew so much attention. First, because Roger Federer is in the Davis Cup. That's going to get attention. Probably the most attention Davis Cup has seen in many years, at least a Davis Cup final. But partly because the Swiss team, which has always been seen as a harmonious group, we had some sort of, I don't know if there was infighting, but there were stories of infighting. And it all started during the semifinals of the World Tour Finals, where there was possibly an incident between Stan Wawrinka and Mirka Federer. Then we have Federer withdrawing from the London final against Djokovic. All that questions about his back and how he would play and how much he would play, and inevitably like who would play Swiss doubles. But in the end, we kind of saw what we've seen all year from this Swiss team. You've seen Roger Federer and Stan Wawrinka put this team on their back, and ultimately they were the best team all year long because they have two of the ultimately four best players in the world.
Yeah, nothing much else can add than that, other than the fact that I guess it's a bit of a surprise just how good Federer was. I think, especially after we saw him withdraw from a final, the ATP World Tour final, I think a lot of people had their doubts going into this tournament, so definitely proved them wrong in that regard.
Well, he wasn't great. Obviously, he goes swept by Gael Monfils. The question is that Stan really elevated everybody else on that team, carried the doubles matchup, provided that comfort in beating Tsonga, and then when Tsonga had to pull out, Federer got Gasquet, and that obviously is a matchup that suits him really well compared to the more athletic and harder serving Tsonga. I know Federer is getting all the attention. It's his first. It's the issue of him completing one of the things that he hadn't done. But ultimately, should we look back at the 2014 Davis Cup as, you know, kind of the cherry on top for Stan Wawrinka? You know, he has the slam, he had the first Masters event, and now we kind of carry this team to the first Davis Cup. Should this be Stan's kind of 2014 Davis Cup and Stan's 2014 kind of cherry on top?
Yeah, I could see that because without Stan, yeah, there's no way the Swiss team does get to the final and win it at the end of the day because Stan automatically doubles the depth of your team when you already have Federer there who's carried you that far. So, yeah, definitely. And then Stan, when, like you mentioned, when Federer wasn't 100%, Stan was there to pick up the slack and take this Davis Cup final.
No, absolutely. Let's talk about Roger's resume. Obviously, a couple of things we're missing. You know, every argument about the GOAT is very complicated. Obviously, different eras, and even when you're comparing a Nadal and Federer, one, Federer obviously has done ultimately better at the World Tour Finals, where Nadal has none, and some cite Nadal's success with the Davis Cup team and his success in the Olympics with his gold medal. Does your opinion of Federer's resume change in any significant manner now he has the one Davis Cup title?
I think it really doesn't. I mean, usually the Davis Cup is never brought up as like, oh, the X player like missed out on the Davis Cup in their career, so if they did, they would have elevated it. But I think it more shows Federer's character, where he's able to always find new things to chase, new goals to go after. And I think in a way that keeps him why he always acts so humble to the media, because he does. I think he legitimately does feel that he has a lot to gain from his career, even at what a lot of people say is the end of his career. I mean, he did mention he wants to get a gold medal in 2016 when he'll be 35 years old.
And I think Federer put it into perspective. He kind of accentuated that this was a team victory. This is not for him. It's not for his resume. And I agree with you. I like that he has things to chase still, and that the Davis Cup is a weird animal. Since it's played every year, not everybody's going to bring it every year. There's been a couple of years that Spain has not been a factor. Eventually Spain will join the force again. So everything kind of needs to go together, and that's what kind of happened for Switzerland this year. So I'm happy to see Roger. He's such a great ambassador for Swiss tennis, for global tennis, obviously, that it's great for the country and for them to accomplish this, because, these things don't come together always. And for them to have it happen with Roger still playing is a great moment. So an ultimately satisfying Davis Cup, but let's talk about the less satisfying ATP World Tour Finals.
Yep, no other way to put it other than it was largely a bust. We got blowouts, pretty dull matches, and ultimately in the final we had a withdrawal. Like you mentioned before, Federer withdrew from the final, and Djokovic was declared the winner, and that was it. So we've talked a lot about how successful this tournament is commercially and getting all the media there, but what disappointed you this year? It could be whether the tennis or even maybe the organizers didn't pull their weight this year.
Well, I think the organizers always pull their weight. I know that the ATP has picked up their option for another year in London, and I think London is probably the best spot for the ATP World Tour Finals. Like you said, the media attention it gets and the ability to fill a 17,000-seat stadium every day, you're not going to see that, even if you're given the lucrative cash options of the Middle East and China. But I think there's definitely, I wrote about this coming into this World Tour Finals. There was kind of a divide. A lot of people liked the fact that there was new faces, but a lot of these new faces were kind of ultimately satisfied just being there. So you kind of saw that there were only a couple of title contenders. A lot of players knew going in that they were unlikely to win this title, and rather just happy to gain the experience. Ultimately, who disappointed me the most is probably Marin Cilic. He's been ultimately very disappointing since his U.S. Open title. Now, is this the Cilic we expect going forward, that the large inconsistency in his game? Obviously breathtaking tennis in New York, but he's put some duds out there, and that's kind of what I see happening. He's going to have probably the greatest fluctuation of these top eight. As impressed I was with Stan Wawrinka, Marin Cilic, he didn't deliver anything, and he's ultimately my biggest disappointment of the 8 men there, or 9 if you count Federer filling in for Raonic.
Yeah, I think my biggest disappointment has to be Andy Murray. I mean, we heard a lot about Andy Murray was catching fire, pardon the pun, and then by November. So, and then he just ultimately didn't bring it. I mean, there was really no doubt, like after the second day, that the final was going to be Federer versus Djokovic. Or sorry, the phantom final was going to be Federer versus Djokovic. So ultimately, yeah, Andy Murray just didn't create the excitement that he needed for this tournament.
Yeah, that performance against Federer was probably the worst we've ever seen him. Being down 6-love, 5-love, ultimately losing 6-love, 6-1. He joked about it when he was brought in for the exhibition match that, his effort against Federer obviously knocked him out, or lack of effort against Federer. This is a tournament that can be awe-inspiring and thrilling matches. This year just did not deliver. So give me one name. Somebody you see crashing the top 8 next year. Who do you like to see crash the top 8?
Well, there's a very, very easy answer for this, and I think I'm going to steal it. Grigor Dimitrov. Dimitrov is a very exciting player to watch because, say like somebody like Raonic, there's a lot of detractors of his game that it's all about the big serve, he doesn't move around too much. You can't say the same thing about Dimitrov. Not only does he play an exciting brand of tennis, you can see from his play that he has a type of mentality that he'll one day be a very smart player of tennis. So it'll be a very interesting matchup no matter who you put him up against.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. I think he's on the cusp and probably the one player that should be in the top 8 next year. I'm going to go with the entertainment factor. We had so many blowouts. It'd be great to see Gael Monfils make this. He's never going to do it because he does not put his head in the game for the 8 months it needs to gather all these points, to bring those performances when you have to travel to Thailand or when you have to go to Middle America in August. But Gael Monfils, if he ever makes it, would be a treat. Moving on, the WTA obviously in their offseason now, but we've had 2 significant coaching moves, coaching changes, and both feature dynamic young players who've established themselves in the upper tier of the WTA. On Monday of this week, we found out that Nick Saviano and Genie Bouchard would terminate their coaching relationship that started, at least in earnest, in the last year in terms of traveling with Genie, but they've been associated with each other since Genie was a youngster at his Florida academy. And Simona Halep has made her second coaching change after another career year, dropping Wim Fissette, who you may remember as a Clijsters coach advisor, and going more back to her roots, her Romanian roots, picking up Victor Ionita as coach. I think the thing about coaching and how much impact it has, it's hard to determine. We don't have, quantifiable stats regarding that. Sometimes it's just fit. Sometimes it's, the player succeeds without any help of the coach, whoever the coach is. But more interesting here is that you have 2 players who have basically, if you call it, the spending capital now. They're top 5 players, or around their top 5 players. They have the ability to pick and choose. How important do you think it is for these young stars or young players to pick, I don't want to say right coach, but a coach that certainly they are comfortable with now because they have the choice of coach, and it's not something where the coach kind of has the power now. It's these players have full control. When Serena, it's Serena Inc. It's Maria Sharapova Inc. They have total control of their team. Simona and Genie now are beginning to put these pieces together, and they are going to start to build their teams. And how important do you think it is to build the right team going forward?
Well, I think the thing with tennis is that you rarely stay with one coach for your entire career because you want to learn something new from each coach and continue to build your game. There's always a way that you can continue to grow. And I can't really speak for how Romanian tennis has developed their players, but I know Tennis Canada, it's unlike other countries, their coaches don't necessarily have to be from Canada. So I know Genie Bouchard for a long time has been able to pick pretty much any coach that she feels suits her game the best. And I think if she wasn't able to do that, then she wouldn't be at the level that she is now, because she within the last 2 years we saw a lot of development from being a junior at the 2012 Wimbledon and winning that to making the Wimbledon final. So I think there's a lot to be learned from different coaches, and I think Genie knows that, and she's able to build on that.
Absolutely, but I think since both now have the power, it's important that they don't choose pushover coaches. One thing about Nick Saviano, and especially I think we saw this in a lot of material we got during the U.S. Open, is that Saviano will challenge Bouchard, and did challenge Bouchard. They were kind of, verbally, they would, get into it with each other. And that's healthy in many cases. For Simona now, she's gone back to her comfort zone. So we'll see. I think that can work for Simona. She's, in many senses, a very low-maintenance star. Where Genie I don't know what type of star she is or what type of player, what kind of attention she needs. If she was going to look for somebody like Saviano who can push her, or if she's going to look for somebody who's going to, more accompany her or complement her style and her, behavior and her attitude and all the atmosphere. So it'll be interesting to see who Genie chooses, and it'll be interesting to see how Simona and Victor's relationship kind of flourishes in 2015. Okay, let's talk about our last segment on the IPTL.
IPTL, in case you don't know, stands for International Professional Tennis League. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, it sounds right.
All right, that's what it means. Yeah, so it's it will take a lot of the top tennis players from the ATP and the WTA, and they'll be playing exhibition matches throughout the November and the rest of December. It's a good idea in the sense that it will obviously bring more attention to the sport, which we're fans of, but at the same time, it does add to
It was Premier Tennis League, not professional.
Oh, Premier Tennis League, my mistake. Yeah, but at the same time, it adds length to an already lengthy tennis season. So I ask you, how do you think the media should cover this tournament?
Well, I think it's very difficult. It's going to be exhibitions. This has been a mind trust of Mahesh Bhupathi, the former doubles star, to create kind of like the Indian Cricket League, the Indian Premier Cricket League, where you have like a 6-week, all the big stars put on teams, and the teams are going to be across Southeast Asia and the Middle East. You'll have Dubai, you have a team in India, a team in Singapore. So it's an interesting angle of it, but largely it's still exhibitions, and it's such a rigorous season that I think how the tennis media should cover it is that, okay, sure, it's great. You're going to see Wozniacki, Wawrinka, Federer, Serena, Genie, a lot of these big stars, but I want media to be aware that if these players, largely they're in it for the money. So you cover it as exhibition, but you have to store this information because you have to know, okay, if a player says in February, man, I'm too tired, I think it's a fair question to bring up. Maybe you should not have, participated in so many exhibitions in Southeast Asia. I think it's a fair question. Exhibitions I think are valuable. It helps sponsors. It brings tennis to certain regions. Rich people get to see the best stars in exhibition, pay money for that. But I think it's a fair question to ask when a player says, "Hey, I've hit the wall." Maybe you should not have kind of considered this in your schedule if you keep complaining about, hey, tennis goes on forever.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's only current players in this, right?
Largely, yeah. There may be a sprinkling of the older players, but I think it is the draw of it is that you're going to get the biggest stars, biggest current stars.
So then, do you think a potential thing that they might do in the future to mitigate a possible player burnout is mix in a few current players and put them with legends, so to speak? So you still get some draw from the older generation of players, but you can be still the current stars of today.
Yeah, that's kind of the model of the World Team Tennis, Billie Jean King's World Team Tennis that happens in the States during the summer. It's a mix of retired players, but that never draws any of the top 10 players. So here, obviously, you have money drawing these players. So the fact is, tennis players, even the elite tennis players, they get good appearance fees. This is just the most highly advertised way of getting appearance fees. So in a way, you can't hide from it now. Before, say, if you were Rafael Nadal, you went to Abu Dhabi, you got your appearance fee, it was kind of nowhere. This is going to get some sort of attention. So I think it's going to be difficult for these players to kind of say, hey, I'm very tired with all this coverage and all this attention being brought to, hey, I know you were playing exhibition matches for money, so maybe you shouldn't have done that. So it's going to be tougher now for these star players to hide from the fact that, hey, we're tired, but, we saw you in this exhibition matches.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's going to be tough to balance it too.
Are you looking forward to the IPTL? Are you going to check it out at all?
To be honest, probably not. Just because I feel like, I've had enough tennis January to November, and especially living in North America where Sometimes I even follow those tournaments in Washington, that tournament in Atlanta, just because I like the U.S. Open Series. So I feel like maybe the European and Asian audiences get a break during that time. I don't really get that break, so I'm going to use this as my break right now.
Fair enough. We're almost nearing the end of this episode, and like always, we like to add new certain games. Today we're doing a game of tennis roulette, which essentially is we put a country, a player, or a year into a random name generator. Today we're doing countries, and we've randomly been drawn Taiwan. So we're going to talk about the state of tennis in Taiwan. I think you brought it up when we were researching this, that Taiwan's a very tricky country to judge it. Let's look at who they're. Significantly on the women's side, they're led by Su Wei, who last year was ranked 23rd in singles, but has now dropped. But she had a good year this year, winning the doubles title at the 2014 French Open. And on the men's side, led by Yensun Liu, who's been around the top 30 for a while now, known for his 2010 Wimby quarterfinal appearance. This year, he reached his first finals in Auckland, losing to John Isner, and later in the year, he kind of drew a lot of ATP attention because he wanted to participate in the Asian Games final when the ATP said, no, he's got to show up in China. Eventually didn't show up in China, and there was talk that he might be banned for a time, but it looks like he'll just be fined. So maybe give me your impressions of either these two players, Taiwan, and any influence you see on Taiwanese tennis.
I think I'm just going to make like a Bill Simmons type comparison here, and I think Taiwan, not saying they're at that point right now, but they kind of have the potential to be like an Asian Switzerland, where in the fact that they're a fairly small country surrounded by a lot of larger countries, obviously China, Japan, and the like. But once in a while you've seen the potential where they can have those players that have pretty decent runs in, whether it be in doubles or, and of course, in singles.
No, exactly, and I think they're going to be benefited by the increase in tennis in the region. You know, more Chinese tournaments, more tournaments in the Southeast Asia region. It's going to help this country put the time and maybe the attention it needed for players to get into grassroots development, and maybe we'll see a rise in Taiwanese tennis in the future. Okay, moving on to our social media highlight of the week. This week we're going to go to the ATP, and Dominic Thiem, who is known for his mega responses, will be fulfilling his duty in the Austrian army, going through basic training. It's a great story to read on ATP World Tour. It's a young guy with a lot of potential, and you know, if you follow him on Twitter, Facebook, wherever, he's going to give you mega answers. Thank you for listening to this episode. You can find us on SoundCloud at the Urban Tennis Network, on WordPress at urbantennis.wordpress.com, at our YouTube page. And thank you to DJ Skoll, who put together our last podcast, put some edits in, gave us some great clips. Find him on his YouTube page at DJ Skoll. Thank you for listening to episode 38. Swiss Exes will be back in a couple of weeks.